Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and in each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research and their experiences. So put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? My guest for this episode of the show was Sue Palmer. Absolutely delighted to be able to talk to Sue. Sue's written somewhere in the region of 200 to 250 different books: 21st Century Boys, 21st Century Girls, Upstart, and probably her best known work, Toxic Childhood. It's absolutely fantastic to be able to talk to Sue. Real insight into what's going on with children, where we're going wrong and where we could be going right as well. I really hope you enjoy this episode. And so without further ado, let's go over to the interview. Hi, thank you for agreeing to talk to the podcast. Do you want to start by introducing yourself for us?
My name's Sue Palmer, and I'm the author of Toxic Childhood, which was first published in 2006.
Thank you. And what's your history in the subject of sociology, Sue? Did you study it yourself at degree level or anything like that?
My history in study of sociology is really very, very brief, and I'm absolutely stunned to find myself on a sociology syllabus, actually. I basically was a teacher to start with, and then I specialised in literacy. I studied sociology on my training course, and I did sociolinguistics during my master's. But no, I'm not a sociologist, so it does worry me a bit that I'm sort of being put in that bracket. What I was trying to do with the book was, I suppose, try to look more at biology, at the interface between human biology and culture.
Yeah. And you were a head teacher yourself, is that right, at primary level?
Yeah, I was a primary head teacher, but I was just absolutely obsessed with literacy, and I ended up, from really the middle of the 1980s, I was an independent literacy researcher and speaker and writer and things, and I did loads and loads of different jobs. So
you don't actually class yourself as a sociologist, is that fair to say?
Oh, certainly not, no. Wow. I mean, I interviewed quite a few, so for Toxic, I mean, the wonderful thing about doing that book was the number of amazing academics and people that I met. And what I tried to do in each of the 10 chapters that I read was sort of summarise all the stuff I was finding. It took 8 years.
Wow.
Summarise all the stuff I was finding, and then I'd always send it back to one of the main academics to read and check over the science, because, it was so wide-ranging. I mean, I looked at nutrition and sleep and communication and family structures and commercialization, all sorts of stuff. So I needed to know that experts were checking it.
Yeah. What was the starting point for it? I remember reading you saying it all kind of started for you when television started to go into the bedroom.
Oh, no, that was, no. No, it all started for me with two of my odd jobs. I mean, I worked in television for quite a long time. I don't know whether you remember Magic Pencil. Maybe some of your students will. But I was the BBC's literacy consultant for a long time, so I worked on a lot of programmes for that. So I'm not, people think I'm some sort of technophobe. I'm not. Lots of stuff. No, it started because I was doing two jobs. One in the late 90s. One was that I was writing for the Times Educational Supplement. I wrote a lot for them over, about 10 years. And the other one was working for something called the National Literacy Strategy. I don't know whether you remember it. Well, it was a great big national project, and I'd written their grammar materials, and I was travelling around the country talking to primary teachers, mainly, about the stuff, and I was meeting thousands of teachers every year, I mean, so many, and what I was noticing was that all over the country, everywhere I went, people seemed to be sort of muttering about the children, and they thought they were changing slightly, and it slightly worried them that particularly they're finding it more difficult to focus attention.
Yeah.
And things like they're not getting along as well in the playground. It's all sorts of little niggles. Nobody was wanting to get at the kids. They were worried. They thought, is there something going on that we don't understand? And because it was so widespread, it was sort of making me edgy. And then I got an assignment from the Times at Up to go and interview this researcher called Sally Ward. She was an academic studying. She'd done a long-term research study on children's listening skills, very young children's listening skills, and she got these quite terrifying results that showed a really serious decline over the period 1984 to 1999. I mean, it was significant, massively.
Yeah.
And I just stood there in her office and said, why?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I'm thinking about it, and I just think it's changes in lifestyle, and the world's changing so fast, and parents' lifestyles are changing, and so children's lifestyles are changing, and I just don't think we're really aware of the possible knock-on effects. And she explained the sorts of things that might be affecting little children's listening skills, and it's so sort of just ordinary. It was like one of the main ones was that the buggies that parents push them about in all faced outwards, and Sally said,
Of course, yeah.
This is the wrong way, because if the child's going to learn to listen, they've got to be able to tune into their parents, so they should be looking at them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was things like that I just never thought about.
That seems so obvious now, doesn't it? That seems bizarre.
It's so obvious when you think about it.
Yeah.
And that instead of parents, because we got tellies and videos, instead of parents singing to their children to comfort them, and there was a real sort of sense of attachment, and the child would be looking at the parent's face, you could just tune them into, well, I bought my own daughter a video of nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was all sorts of little things that she said, well, over time it's going to have a cumulative effect. So that actually became it. I became possessed. And I started sort of talking to teachers again, and between there had one group of teachers that we sort of, what did they think it was, and I came up out of that with the 10 chapters, and then I just went round finding academics and interviewing them.
Yeah.
And the thing was that some of them were sociologists. There was a really nice sociologist of the family that I met in Oxford, but many of them were actually biologists of various kinds.
Yeah.
And what I realised, because I knew the Aries book and Postman, and I'm just so honoured to be on the same book list as Neil Postman. But what I realised was that those books had been written before all the sort of new neuroscience that came through about the early development of the brain during the 1990s. And that they did not, in sort of treating childhood as a cultural topic, they didn't really take into account things that in previous generations have more or less been taken for granted.
Yeah.
That we could no longer take for granted because our lifestyles changed so rapidly and so dramatically over the period from round about, I'd say, really the 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying 1980s and 1990s. Surely it's got even worse, is it not? If we think about the use of smartphone technology, for example.
It's on an exponential curve. I mean, it has been. It was about the 1960s that Gordon Moore, who was, God, I learned such interesting things on this trip. Gordon Moore was the founder of Intel, or one of them, and he said in the 1960s that the power and potential of digital technology would roughly double every 2 years.
Yeah.
That's called Moore's Law, and it's held fast. In fact, it's actually going faster than that now, I believe.
I'm sure.
So that, I mean, we've been on this hugely, I mean, right through human history, there's been, this, I suppose, almost exponential curve. But once it was really, I would say, round about the 1980s, it started to be hugely significant in terms of every aspect of daily life.
Yeah. And what would you say, for particularly students listening as well, what would you say are the major concerns? If you try and condense toxic childhood, what are the major concerns for children?
Well, the first thing that, I became concerned about well-being.
Yeah.
There was the whole issue of developmental disorders, which had really got out of control. So that was why I was in development to start with. But as time went on, there were more and more suggestions that there would be problems with well-being. And the interesting thing was that in the same year that Toxic was first published, the United Nations did this survey of childhood well-being in the developed world, and the UK came bottom,
Right.
21st out of 21 countries. So I think there was something there about our culture particularly, and the one that was just above us was America, about our cultures particularly. So I think the thing that, to begin with, really bothered me the most was the commercialisation aspect.
Yes.
I mean, that was huge. And I got involved in all sorts of surveys and reports and things about that. But the more you learned, the more hopeless it was.
Yeah.
It's so international and marketing departments are so rich. And I got really frustrated. So the second string, and the one that I'm still pursuing now, was to think, well, what is it that children actually need for healthy development? Let's not focus on the negative.
Yeah.
What do they actually need, and how can we ensure that within a contemporary society? And it comes back to that first 7 years, really, and trying to make sure that what we do in terms of the way we care for children, and particularly also play.
Yeah. Because I was going to say it. Sorry to interrupt you. You say the first 7 years. I'm also interested. I know we're probably going slightly away from Toxic here, but your other book, Upstart, about when children should actually start schools.
Well, it's also, I run a campaign as well called Upstart Scotland.
Yeah.
Because I live in Scotland. So anybody that wants to follow on Twitter is @Upstart Scott. But it's actually really interesting because through that, the contacts have grown amazingly, and we're finding that it's not just me and people who are interested in early years or developmental psychology or education. It's public health people, it's children's rights people, it's the police, because they're really, really, in Scotland particularly, understanding the relationship between crime and early adverse childhood experiences. It's at the arts. Everything about human beings really has its roots in what happens in those early years when the brain is developing so rapidly.
So what's the answer? Do we need increased maternity and paternity, parents spending longer with children, let them play, start school later? What do you think?
Well, what I did was look at the countries that came top in the Wellbeing Index.
Yeah. Are they Scandinavian countries?
That's the Nordic countries.
Yeah, Nordic countries,
it's Finland, particularly Sweden, Norway, all of them. They have really, really good levels of childhood well-being, and the Netherlands is good as well. I mean, if you look at what other people are doing that seems to work, then you can sort of look at what the science is that would underpin it working. Yeah. And, it just seems to me that particularly Finland has got it right. I mean, they don't start school until children are 7, and before that, there's this incredible system of parents get home care allowance, so one of them can stay at home until the child's 3 if they want. If they don't want, they can trade it in for daycare. And then there's this amazing daycare system, which stretches. For most children, they start when they're 2 or 3, and it goes till they're 7. Play-based, lots of outdoor play. Most kids do actually pick up reading and writing over the course of the time there. So there's not this pressure that we have increasingly on kids. And I think also the fact that there's so much attention to early childhood in those countries, and the wisdom of the people who know about development sort of spreads around the country. So parents are much more aware of what little children need in terms of development than I would say they are here.
Yeah, what do you think our reluctance in the UK is to do that? You know, if we were to say primary schools now start at 7, what's our fear? What's our holding back on doing?
I remember one head teacher when I was speaking in the Netherlands, and he just said, "Over here on the mainland, Mrs. Palmer, we think you Anglo-Saxons are mad." And I just think it's cultural. I mean, I think it's so ingrained in people's minds that, you know, the kids go to school when they're 4 or 5. And over recent years particularly, there's been this absolute obsession with sort of accelerating literacy. And can I, with my literacy hat on, can I say that it's pointless? I mean, you can force children to read by force feeding them phonics. I mean, you can do it. You know, you can train a dog to walk on its hind legs. But whether that's going to be good for them long term in terms of their well-being is another matter. Some kids just don't learn to read until a bit older. And that's not because they're dim or anything, it's because everybody's different. I mean, some kids have growth spurts at different times from other kids, and everybody's got different circumstances. Everybody's got slightly different genetic makeup. So those first 7 years are so precious in terms of sort of physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development, and we should be doing everything we can from the knowledge that we have to ensure that children get the best possible circumstances to grow up.
Because it seems really quite counterproductive, doesn't it? If you think of children at 5 or 6 full of all this energy, and then you say, right, sit down on the mat and listen to that, you know, you're taking that energy away.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, it wasn't so bad when I was a kid, because I'm ancient, I'm 71 now. So back in the 50s, I remember this start when I was 5, but reception was reception. I mean, it was just like a nursery. Yeah. In fact, I remember we all had to lie down and have a little sleep after lunch.
After milk time.
Yeah, and there just wasn't this mad panic to push kids on. But, that's really it's one of the reasons I was grateful that writing the book got me out of the literacy thing, because I couldn't bear, particularly in England at the moment, to be involved in what they're doing to little children. Yeah.
Do you think there might be some influence from maybe some of the Asian countries, you know, somewhere like Japan or Korea, where it's education. They do study very early and quite an excelled level as well.
Well, again, one of the wonderful things about the book was it gave me an opportunity to visit lots of places. I mean, it was published in Japan, so I got to go to Yokohama and Tokyo. And I was actually quite interested in, they do push, but not till the kids are a bit older. I mean, they don't start school to 6. But the whole sort of culture is less pressurised on the children, and they're very, very keen to give them freedoms. Apart from, I mean, a big city is difficult, but most places, Japanese kids are out playing, wandering the streets when they're quite young, and people think that's good. I mean, all of them, they won't let the school run happen. Kids go, they have these walking bus stops, and the big kids collect the little kids, and they all amble to school together. So, I mean, there are different cultural traditions. In fact, in Singapore, it's really interesting because it's got a kindergarten stage to 6 that's actually thought of as one of the best earliest curricula going. So they're really sort of hopefully, sort of trying to do the right things by kids till 6. And what's really interesting is that the World Economic Foundation has now been pushing play, because the science of play is getting, you can't ignore it.
Absolutely.
And the sorts of things children develop through play are the sorts of things we're going to need in the economy, in a creative economy in the future. Yeah. So World Economic Foundation is pushing like mad on this, and Singapore has just changed its testing machine so that there's absolutely no testing before the age of 8.
Absolutely right. Well, yeah. The idea of testing children at 5, 7, that's just ridiculous. Yeah.
And it's cruel, actually.
Yes, I'd go with that as well.
No, I think, I mean, it's dead easy with something like, I mean, a lot of people have said, I read Toxic Child and it made me really miserable. And I thought, oh God, well, it didn't actually when I was doing it. But I'm glad I did it because I think it was very useful to pull all this together. It's that business of actually sort of refocus so that you're thinking, well, don't think about what's going wrong, let's think about how to put it right.
Yeah, especially where you've seen examples of nations where they are getting it right.
Oh God, I've been to Finland 3 times now, and that's my favourite country. You see the secondary school. Yeah. Fantastic. Nobody is, well, you get a break of 15 minutes after every 45-minute lesson. And sometimes they do double lessons, but then you get a half-hour break.
Yeah, teachers need that as well, not just the students.
Everybody needs it. I mean, when you think about the science, your brain does need time to sort of absorb stuff.
Yes.
This business about being on task every living minute of the day is just such nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, even as adults, if we go to a meeting, if someone's waffling on, you only listen for 10 minutes before your mind starts to wander. Even 10 minutes might be a bit ambitious.
Yeah. I mean, actually, in the past we probably could listen for longer.
Yes, that's true.
According to how it was.
Yeah.
And there was, I mean, when I was looking at the influence of digital media, because it does move so fast, there was one scientist who said attention deficit is the paradigmatic disorder of our time.
Yes, I'm sure it is.
And I mean, I know that's true of me. I mean, but at the same time, it does seem as though if you make sure kids keep it real for the first 7 years and learn to exist in slow time, which is the problem now. We never learn to exist in slow time. No. And learn to cope and get the play and do all the other things. You'll also adapt as my 71-year-old brain has adapted gradually to IT and all the other things that are going on. Just discovered Zoom, isn't it wonderful? You can do all of it then, and then, that makes us even more powerful and more likely to be able to solve all the problems that we've managed to bring about in the world. Yeah,
I do worry. I don't know if you've done any research on this, but mobile phone, smart technology that we're constantly being updated must be pushing up anxiety levels because you're never relaxing.
I think that's almost certainly the case. I think the big thing there, because you're getting back into the commercialisation because they want us to, have the next model and spend more money. But the big thing there is, again, if you've had a bit of a childhood, you've got a resilience. I mean, some people are more naturally resilient than others. Yeah. But the better we've dealt with the early years, the more likely it is that you can just sort of say, sod off. Yeah. and not be influenced by just the normative pressure just to keep doing this stuff because some marketers told you to do it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done though, isn't it? Especially for children, pest the power if everyone else has got it.
Well, pest power was one of the things that drove me mad when I researched that. I mean, I read all the books, the marketing manuals. There was one of them that actually damaged my house by throwing it across the room. I mean, it is absolutely, to me, evil that developmental psychologists, their job should be to help children, and yet they're employed by marketing firms for vast amounts to turn children into little sales reps. Yeah. To get parents buying them things that aren't good for them. So, I mean, that is just wicked.
That is.
In the old-fashioned sense of the word.
Yeah. And I think sometimes parents are aware of that, but still the pressure, particularly if everyone else has got the product.
That was what, when I was doing, there was Reg Bailey's big survey, the last of the commercialisation of childhood national projects. There was just one, there was loads of parents' comments, and the one I always remember was, I've just given up. It was like being a very, very small fish swimming against a massive
Yes.
tide.
Oh.
Again, that's why one of the things I've always said, and then my daughter took, well, I don't know whether she took the advice or whether she did, it's probably very natural to her anyway, but I've always said with young parents, when you have children, try to get yourself a little network of friends around you right from the beginning that you're close to and you talk about things with, and that will support you, because it takes a village to raise a child, and at the moment, what the marketers want to do is to get you for their own, and you're only going to be able to resist it if you've got strength in numbers, mates backing you up.
That's really sad to hear. Do you know? Did you say we were 21st of 21 countries? Are we still at that level? Is the UK still there?
21 countries in the developed world that
Right.
came bottom. Yeah.
Is that still the case?
No, it was Tony Blair's government, or maybe Gordon Brown's. They were furious with me. I kept being told I was that person saying we had a toxic childhood culture. But they looked carefully at the figures and worked out ways to, each of the various measures that had been surveyed, and worked out ways to nudge them up. So we went up a bit the next time. But I have to say, I mean, the mental health figures in our country are shameful.
Yes. The other thing that I was going to ask you, because I know you've also published 21st Century Boys and 21st Century Girls, are your concerns of toxic childhood different depending on sex? Have you got any specific?
And I do mean sex, not gender.
Yeah.
I think there are some biological issues that are relevant. And I think the girls book was the one that I became obsessed with trying to do something about it. If anyone's interested, the Upstart website has got one of my recent blogs on it called Girls Just Need to Have Fun. Because little girls are more readily socialised than little boys. Little boys tend to kick against it varies, obviously. It's not a straightforward binary thing, but on the whole, the female sex tends to be more easily socialised. And that means that they're much more likely to become very, very compliant when they start school, and much more likely than to be bothered by the sorts of issues that come up on social media. So I think that's why you see more anxiety in girls. And I think, we parents, when I talk to parents about the Upstart idea of raising the school starting age and having this kindergarten stage, the boys' parents thought, oh, yay, love that, oh, that would be brilliant, oh, gosh, mine would be, he needs to run about. And the girls' parents go, oh, mine likes reading books. And I think, oh, gosh, no. My generation, we were sort of thrown out of the house at the age of about 2 or 3 to be looked after by the big kids.
Yeah.
So even though I was an early reader, I had a granny who told me that I hadn't got to have my nose stuck in a book all the time. I'd got to go out with the other kids or I'd go funny. And I did actually get that sort of freedom. And I think it's something I treasure. And that I think really for the last 30 years more is less and less the sort of memory that kids will have, and particularly this coronavirus. I mean, all those children banged up at home with their families. I don't think I could have borne it. It's very scary.
And what about from the male point of view? What would you say are the biggest concerns for toxic childhood for males?
Well, the biggest concern for males is that there's a literature, and it's recently been rediscovered. I heard a program about the same stuff again on the radio a few days ago. There's a guy called Sebastian Kramer that I spoke to, and he did a whole literature on the fragile male, because in sort of biological terms, males are more susceptible to an enormous number of things, including the developmental disorders, but also to various health disorders as time goes on. And that's because they've only got the one X chromosome. The Y chromosome is weaker.
We're actually seeing that with COVID at the moment, aren't we? I think it's about 70% male.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why they were turned up on the radio again. There's sort of And I think that's the point. We've got one of the things about our technological advance, which was remarkable. And if you can imagine, I was born in 1948 in the same year and the same street as the first modern computer that Alan Turing put together in Manchester University. So I've seen the whole thing, and it has been the most exciting ride.
Wow.
An amazing time, but we've got to bear in mind that we're still the same basic creatures that we were in Cro-Magnon times, and we can't expect our children's brains to develop with the same creativity, resilience, adaptability, all the other things, unless we make sure we provide what are essentially, in our sense, quite primitive things like love and play and
the basics,
nourishing food.
It sounds so obvious, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? My granny knew. Yeah, probably didn't need to do a research study. I could have just asked my gran.
Yeah. What would be your overall advice then, in terms of, let's focus particularly on Britain. What would you say we need to change immediately? Is it the school age to start with?
I would start by going in with that kind of, I've written a book about it, because I really think if you do that, you automatically help change people's attitudes towards early childhood. The business of accelerating kids through childhood happens through the commercialisation, but it's also happening through the education system. So you make a change like that, and you can change the culture.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the Finnish daycare system is that there is now, in every community, a place which is recognised as full of experts on childhood. All the people that work there, they've all got degrees. They're brilliant. So there's a trusted source of information in every community about what is important for little children. Rather like a sort of, modern version of the granny. Yeah.
So all move to Finland then? That's the answer, yeah?
Well, yeah, except it's quite a difficult language. Their grammar is absolutely frightening.
Yes.
No, it's a lovely country, actually. And one of the reasons, I actually trained as a teacher in Scotland, and most of my teaching career was in Scotland, but I've been very glad to move back here because we're a bit more like the Nordic countries than England is. We're certainly not anywhere near as insane in what we're doing in the education system. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what's happened down there from the point of view of, the general well-being of the kids. So I thought there was a chance up here that we might get somewhere. So we're going to carry on pushing. And then maybe that could influence England if we were to get a government that was remotely sympathetic.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
I think you have to. Hope must spring eternal.
Yes. I just wanted to ask you before we go, actually, where people can read your work, buy your books, read your blogs.
Well, as I say, everything I do these days revolves around the Upstart website. So that's www.upstart.scot. And I tweet as @UpstartScott. And I think that's lovely. Isn't that brilliant, having a Twitter handle like Upstart Scott?
That's fantastic.
I don't know. I'm writing at the moment because, keeps you busy when you're sort of stuck inside. But I think most of my work will carry on being Upstart related because it seems useful.
Yeah, that seems the priority at the moment. I agree.
Aye.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Sue.
Lovely to speak to you and to your students, and my very, very best wishes to them.
Thank you very much.
And do remember, sociology must always be tempered with biology.
That's a great quote to finish on. I think we'll do that. Thank you, Sue. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.